What's going on, everyone? So today I want to share one fundamental belief that has completely changed the way that we navigate through college recruiting, and it's been working really, really well for the families that we're working with. And so if it worked well for them, I'm assuming it will also work well for you. So we've helped hundreds of athletes and families just in the last couple months. And so I wanted to share what we have learned because I think that it will save you a lot of time. It'll save you a lot of money, and it will also make your process easier in general. So if you like those things, then you will probably like what I'm about to tell you. And that is that showcases and camps are for evaluation, not exposure. So if you've been in the recruiting process for any amount of time, you know there are these things called tournaments and showcases and camps. And I would call all of these together recruiting events, right? And so if you've been in the process for any amount of time, you know that these are pretty much touted as the best way of getting exposure in college recruiting. Like, college coaches don't know who your kid is. They're going to be at an event. If your kid goes to that event and plays really well, then those coaches are going to see it, and then they're going to be interested, and they're going to give you a scholarship worth tens of thousands of dollars. That is how the line of thinking goes in college recruiting, and it's been that way for a very long time. The problem is that we are not seeing this to be true. It has not been true for our families that showcases and camps are the best way to get on college coaches' radars. We've had a lot more success with other things like email and social media in particular that have made it much easier to start conversations with college coaches, do it faster, do it cheaper, do it more sustainably. And so that has just been a huge fundamental shift for us, and it's worked incredibly well. And I think it's because when you go to a showcase or a camp, you have to remember that there's also another side that is coming to those events, and that is the college coaches. They have to pick which events to go to as well. It's not like they have a list of events and they're like, oh yeah, I know that this player is going to be at this event all the way down all the time. It doesn't work like that all the time, right? They don't have a list, a magic ball that tells them the best events that they should go to. They have to make educated decisions, just like you do, about which events are going to be most worth their time. So how do they do that? They get a list of players that they know are good and are worth looking into, and then they say, where are those players going to be? And then they go to those events. So they're not just randomly picking events. They're going to events where they know players who are good are going to be there, because then they're going to be able to watch them, and they know even if no other players there are good, they will not have wasted their time because they went to go watch someone who is. And so for coaches as well, they tend not to use these events to find new players. They use these events to evaluate players that they already know of or have talked to. And so this is a huge deal because on the one end, they are using these events for evaluation, and so many families in recruiting are using these events for exposure, and those are not aligned. And so that's why when you go to an event and your kid plays incredibly well, better than everyone else, and at the end of the event, the coaches end up talking to 3 kids and your kid isn't one of them, and you go, I don't understand. My kid played better than everyone else that was there. Why did that happen? Why wasn't my kid one of the 3, that they talked to? And the reason why is because those 3 players, those coaches were probably talking to those 3 players before the event. They already planned on talking to them. What your kid did at that event doesn't even really matter. And so showcases and camps, as soon as we made this switch, everything really took off. And I had to learn this personally because in high school, when I went through the process, I did the showcase and camp runaround. Like, I was gone every single weekend. In my high school career as a 16-year-old, I never had a single weekend where I was just chilling. Like, that never happened. I was gone every single weekend, driving 2 hours, flying across the country. I mean, it was every single weekend, right? And I was a pretty good player with pretty good stats, like ended up playing professional baseball, right? Like, I was a pretty good player. Got very little interest in offers. Why? Because I was using events for exposure and college coaches were using those events for evaluation, and they were misaligned. And so I had to learn that the hard way. And then when I got to junior college, in junior college, there's no such thing as recruiting events for junior college. Like, there might be an individual workout or something like that that you can go to, but it's not like you're doing the whole showcase runaround in junior college. And so luckily for me, that option was stripped and I couldn't even rely on that. I had to find a new way to get on college coaches' radars. And so that's when I started figuring out, well, how do I market myself as a player then to these college coaches as a junior college player? And that's when I learned about email and video and social media and all these other things that we now do. And then when I generated a ton of interest, I was like, oh, this is so much easier. This makes way more sense. And I thought, okay, I bet you that this could probably work for high schoolers too. And then started sharing it with high schoolers, and obviously fast forward to where we are now and get crazy good results. And so the whole point though is that it wasn't until it was stripped from me and I didn't have that option that I was like, you know what, I'm going to try something else. And that ended up being the thing that totally changed the game for me and went from not getting any interest to getting double-digit Division I offers, playing at Mississippi State, playing professionally, like completely changed the game for me. And so that has been the main fundamental belief that we have carried into a lot of the families that we work with, and they are seeing the same things. It's not that you can't get interest or offers from recruiting events, you can, but you're spinning the wheel, right? The way that I like to talk about this is sort of like a casino, because I think that it is the best example. And I know some people would be like, well, you can't talk about casino stuff with kids. Like, I'm just giving you an example of how to navigate college recruiting. Okay, forgive me. So when you go to a casino, there's a couple different types of people who go to the casinos. You have people who go to a casino and they just pull the slot machines, right? There's no way for them to tip the scales in their favor. It's just luck. It's like, hopefully this works for me. And they just sit there and they pull the slot machine all day long. That would be showcases and camps, because you don't really know which coaches are going to be there. You don't know if they need your kid's position in grad class. You don't know if they need your kids, if they even think your kid is good. You don't know that they're going to be watching your kid when they go to that event. You don't know that they're going to be in the bathroom at that event when your kid does something amazing. Like, so many things that you're just pulling the slot machine on there. But then there's also people who go to casinos and they try to count cards. They're trying to tip the scales in their favor. And those are the people who tend to make more money. And counting cards would be building relationships with coaches before you go to those events, whether that's through email or social media or some other method. There's another way that you're getting on college coaches' radars and starting those conversations so that when you show up to the event and there's 100 players there, guess who they're watching? Your kid. That is counting cards. And so when you're in the recruiting process, you're in a casino and you can either be pulling the slot machine or you could be counting cards. It's your choice. And I would just rather say, I'd rather count cards, right? That's why I'd rather count cards. I don't want to just leave it up to chance and hope that this works out. And so that fundamental belief has shifted all of our time, effort, and energy into things that count cards rather than pulling the slot machine. And that has accelerated growth. Like, theoretically, you could send a bunch of emails over the course of like a week and get 20 plus interested schools. We see it all the time. You could absolutely do that. And you're never going to get that kind of interest at a showcase or a camp unless your kid is a top 5% player, just an absolute stud, and you're at a huge tournament. Like, there's so many things that have to go right in order for that to happen. Very unlikely that you watching this are that person. If you were, I'd be surprised that you'd be watching this. You'd probably be barricading your door because college coaches would be trying to knock it down. And so if that's not happening, you're probably not in that category. And so there's so many other ways that's easier for you to navigate the process and get more interest in offers than you have right now that doesn't involve traveling all over the country, getting on flights, booking hotel rooms, getting rental cars. Like, it's exhausting. I've done it. It's exhausting. And it wasn't until we changed that and said, you know what, maybe that's not the best way. And it wasn't until we changed that the whole game changed. And now all we focus on is marketing. Like, how can we get in front of as many college coaches as possible? How can we put the spotlight on players who have never had the spotlight before? How do we put their best foot forward so that when the spotlight is on them, that we're showing the best version of the player? The tiny details that make a huge difference, that's where we have directed a lot of our effort and energy, and it's worked incredibly well for us. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't ever go to showcases and camps, that we don't talk about those things. You have to talk about those things. Why? Because college coaches have to see your kid play somewhere. They're going to want to evaluate your kid, right? So we have to still talk about those events. It's just a lot less that we talk about them, and we talk about them in a different way. So a lot of those conversations look like, a family comes to us and says, hey, what events should we be going to? And usually our first question is, well, what schools are you talking to? And then they list off the schools and we say, great, let's start with the schools you're talking to because you already have a competitive advantage with those schools. And then when they list off 5 or 10 or 15, however many it is, then we start saying, great, what's the differences between these schools? What's the communication looked like? What's our goal? How many offers do we have? What's the timeline? What's the timing in the season? Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into that, but we address that after we've already said, these are the schools we're talking to. And now that's a luxury, right? If you aren't talking to any schools, then you have to make blind decisions about recruiting events, and that gets really hard, and that gets really challenging. And so we try to get a competitive advantage from day one, minute one, as much as possible, because it makes such a huge difference. I mean, if you want to think about going into an event, all the things that have to go right in order for that event to pay off for you. Like, you go pay $300 for 2 days on a weekend or something like that. You show up to the event. No one knows who your kid is. So now your kid gets put through drills that every other kid is going through. It's like a factory line. They're getting thrown through these things. And there's things that are completely outside of your control and your kid's control. Like, if you play baseball, and your kid's hitting BP, what if the BP thrower is bad? Whoops, there goes your opportunity. What if they're hitting fungos and the guy hits terrible fungos or something? Whoop, there goes the opportunity. If your kid plays football, right, and the quarterback sucks and your kid's a wide receiver and they don't get any good passes to show their capability, whoop, there goes that opportunity. So there's lots of things like that are out of your control. Not to mention, let's say that you're only there for 2 days. Sports are hard. Your kid has off weekends. If your kid has one off weekend, whoop, there goes that opportunity. Or what if your kid actually crushes it, does amazing for the weekend? And you're like, yes, that was awesome. But the coach got a call from his wife that his daughter is sick and he has to go pick her up from school or something, and the coach leaves early and doesn't actually see your kid do something amazing. Oh, that's unfortunate, outside of your control. And so the point is that there's so many things that have to align in order for showcases and camps to work for exposure. And a lot of those are solved if they know who your kid is ahead of time. Because when the guy throws terrible BP to your kid, the coach has already seen video of your kid hit, so he's not as concerned about necessarily seeing your kid crush it. He's just validating that what he saw on video is in fact the truth. And he's going to cut him slack and be like, oh, the BP thrower was just bad, right? He'll cut him slack. Or when your kid has a bad weekend, they'll say, yeah, it was probably just a bad weekend because I've seen video of him before and he was pretty good. Or when your kid comes up to bat, guess what? The coach is watching because he knows who your kid is. His phone rings, he's not going to answer it because he knows who your kid is. And so these are all little factors that you want in your favor. And so many people are going to events and they don't have any of these, and they're just pulling the slot machines. And how many people win the slots? Not that many. It's just a very small percentage, and it's complete luck. I'm not in the business of getting lucky. I'm in the business of getting athletes awesome opportunities at schools that they love. Scholarships that are worth $80,000 over the course of 4 years. That's the business that I'm in. And so I don't want to rely on luck. I want skill. I want to be counting cards. And since we made that belief change that showcases and camps are for evaluation, not exposure, everything else has been running downhill and we've been off to the races, and it's been awesome. So hopefully you can use that too. And of course, if you want to run the race with us, there's a link in the description to schedule a call with us. We'll walk you through what it is that we do. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time.